The will was in a brown envelope, sealed, thick. The kind of envelope that holds a life's worth of decisions pressed flat between two sheets of legal paper. It sat on the center of a mahogany table in the most expensive room of the most expensive house in East Legon, and every person sitting around that table had been waiting for it for 11 months. 11 months since Mama Abena closed her eyes for the last time. 11 months since the woman who had built Mensa Corsa Holdings from nothing had stopped breathing in a private hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and imported flowers, and the specific, quiet grief of a room where everyone knows the end is close, but no one says it. 11 months since her eldest daughter, Nana Ya, had begun walking through her mother's house like she already owned it. And now the envelope was here. And the man sitting at the far end of the table, the man in the clean but simple shirt, the man with oil faintly visible under his fingernails despite washing 3 times before coming, the man who had driven 40 minutes from a mechanic's workshop in a 12-year-old pickup truck and parked it outside a gate where the other cars cost more than his workshop. That man was watching the envelope too. His name was Kofi Asare. He was 41 years old. He was the last person anyone in that room expected to matter. He was the only person in that room who already knew what was inside. Stay with me. Because what Nana Ya did to Kofi Asare in the months before this morning, and what she discovered when that envelope finally opened, is the kind of story that changes how you understand the words worthy and seen. Subscribe to Tales of Tears African right now, because we never waste your time, and this story will not waste a single second of yours. Mama Abena Mensa Corsa was 67 years old when she got sick. She had been running Mensa Corsa Holdings for 38 years, a conglomerate built from a single fabric trading business that her late husband Emmanuel had started, and that she had taken over when he died young, at 42, from a heart that gave out too fast for a man with too many unfinished plans. Emmanuel left her 3 things: a company with more debt than assets, a daughter named Nana Ya, 17 and already sharp-tongued, and a conviction, spoken to Abena in his last coherent hours, that she was stronger than she knew and would prove it. She proved it. She cleared the debt in 4 years. She expanded into real estate in year 6. She acquired a logistics company in year 11. By year 20, Mensa Corsa Holdings had 400 employees across 3 sectors, and an assessed value that made Mama Abena's name appear in publications she had never read, and at events she had never attended because she was too busy working. She lived simply for a woman of her wealth. A large house in East Legon, yes, but furnished with the specific, restrained taste of someone who preferred quality to display. No chandeliers that announced themselves, no marble that shouted. The floors were clean. The wood was dark and old and polished. The portraits on the walls were family. Emmanuel at 30, young and hopeful, and the children at various ages, and one photograph of Abena herself at 29 standing outside the first company office with a look on her face that the photographer had captured perfectly. Not pride, not triumph. Determination. The specific expression of someone who has decided that the ground they are standing on is not the ground they will die on. She had 2 children. Nana Ya, the eldest. 41 years old now, sharp in the way that intelligence becomes sharpness, when it is never softened by patience. She had studied business in London and come back fluent in the language of boardrooms and the specific, practiced confidence of someone who has been told their whole life that they are exceptional and has chosen to believe it completely. She was beautiful in a way that she was aware of and used. She dressed expensively. She spoke quickly. She had opinions about everything and expressed them before the room had finished thinking. She had been waiting for the company for 20 years. The second child was Kweku, 38, softer in temperament, married with 2 young children, living in Kumasi where he ran a small architectural practice. He came to Accra for Christmas and for funerals and for the calls Mama Abena made when she needed to hear a voice that had no agenda in it. Kweku knew about Kofi. Nana Ya did not. Not at first. Kofi Asare had met Mama Abena 3 years before she died. Not in a boardroom, not at an event, in a breakdown. Her driver, old Mensa, had been with the company for 22 years. But his eyes had been failing for 2 of them, and on a rainy Tuesday in March, he had misjudged the turn onto the Spintex road and put the front left wheel into a drainage ditch at a speed that was low enough to avoid injury, but high enough to destroy the wheel assembly completely. Mama Abena was in the back seat. She was unhurt. She was also 64 years old, 3 kilometers from her next meeting, and in the specific, controlled frustration of someone who has managed worse and is managing this too, but would prefer not to have to. The nearest workshop was Asare Autos, Kofi's place. He came himself because his apprentice had called him and said, "There is a woman in a big car who is being very calm about something that most people would not be calm about." Kofi arrived to find Mama Abena standing outside the car in the rain, not under the umbrella that Mensa was trying to hold over her, but beside him, looking at the wheel with the same focused attention she gave to balance sheets. He greeted her. She greeted him. He looked at the wheel. He said, "I can have this fixed in 2 hours. But the wheel is not the only problem. The alignment has been off for some time. I can see it in the wear pattern on the tires. Whoever services this vehicle regularly has not been checking it." Mama Abena looked at him. She said, "How can you see that from here?" He showed her. She looked at what he showed her. She nodded. She called her office and rescheduled the meeting. She waited at the workshop. While she waited, she watched Kofi work. Not performing watching. The real kind. The attention of someone who recognizes competence because they have spent a lifetime identifying it in other people and building things with it. When the car was done, she paid the invoice without discussion. Then she said, "I have a fleet of 14 vehicles. They are serviced by a garage in Tima, but clearly not well. Would you be willing to take the contract?" Kofi looked at her. He said, "I would need to inspect all 14 before I could give you a proper quote." She said, "Come on Saturday." He came on Saturday. He inspected all 14. His report was 7 pages, handwritten, specific and uncomfortable reading for whoever had been signing off on the previous service records. Mama Abena read every page. She gave him the contract. That was 3 years before she died. In 3 years, Kofi had become something that none of Mama Abena's professional relationships had ever quite become. Not a friend in the social sense. They did not have dinner together or attend the same events. But a presence. Someone she called when a vehicle needed attention. Yes, but also, gradually, someone she called when she wanted a conversation with a person who had no stake in what she decided. She trusted him the way she trusted clean numbers. Completely. Without performance. He had never asked her for anything beyond the contract. He had never treated her differently after he understood the scale of what she had built. He had come to her house twice. Once when a vehicle needed to be seen on site. Once when she had called him about something she would not discuss on the phone. Both times he had arrived in the same 12-year-old pickup truck, parked it at the gate, walked in without looking at the house the way people who are trying to prove they are not impressed. Look at houses, and focused on the reason he had come. The second visit, the one where she would not say on the phone what she wanted to discuss, was 8 months before she died. He had not told anyone what she said to him that afternoon. Not until the will. Nanaya first saw Kofi on a Saturday morning, 6 weeks after Mama Abena was admitted to the private hospital. She had driven to the house to collect some documents her mother wanted and had found the 12-year-old pickup truck parked inside the compound gate, and a man in work clothes crouched beside one of the fleet vehicles, doing something precise and quiet to the undercarriage. She had stood at the top of the front steps and looked at him. He had looked up. He had greeted her. She had said to the housekeeper who appeared at that moment, "Who is this person, and why is he inside the gate?" The housekeeper had explained. Nana Ya had looked at Kofi for a long moment with the specific expression of someone filing information in a category labeled irrelevant. She had gone inside without responding to his greeting. That was the first time. The second time was at the hospital. Mama Abina had asked to see Kofi on a Thursday afternoon. The nurses had been told he was expected. He had arrived at 2 o'clock, parked in the hospital lot, walked to the private wing with the purposeful quiet of someone who knows where they are going and is not seeking permission to go there. Nana Ya had been sitting in the corridor outside her mother's room when he appeared. She stood up. "Who are you here to see?" "Mrs. Mensah Corsa," Kofi said. "She asked me to come." Nana Ya looked at him. At his clothes, clean but work clothes, the kind that absorb a profession the way fabric absorbs color. At his hands, at the truck key visible in his pocket. "She knows you are coming?" she said. "Yes," he said. "She called you herself?" Nana Ya said. "Her assistant called on her behalf," Kofi said. "The appointment was for 2 o'clock. Nana Ya looked at the door. She looked at him. "Whatever she needed to tell you, she can tell me," Nana Ya said. "I'll pass the message." Kofi was quiet for a moment. "With respect," he said. "She asked to see me personally. I'll wait until she is ready." Nana Ya's jaw tightened. She stepped closer. "Listen to me carefully," she said, her voice dropping to the specific, controlled register of someone who is making a threat with a quiet voice. "My mother is sick, and she is not thinking clearly. She does not need people like you coming to her bedside and filling her head with things. Do you understand me?" Kofi looked at her, not with anger, with the specific patient stillness of someone who has been spoken to this way before, and has learned that the response that serves them best is no response at all. He said nothing. The door opened. Mama Abina's nurse, Sister Afua, looked at them both. "Mr. Asare," she said, "Madam is ready for you." Kofi walked past Nana Ya into the room. Nana Ya stood in the corridor with her arms at her sides and the specific, controlled fury of a woman who has just watched a door close in front of her. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what she heard through the door. Not words. She could not hear words. But something else. The sound of her mother's voice, which had been thin and tired in every conversation Nana Ya had had with her for 3 months, carrying a quality it did not carry with her. Ease. Mama Abina sounded at ease. Nana Ya stood in that corridor for 11 minutes. When Kofi came out, she was still there. He acknowledged her with a small nod. She said nothing. He walked away. She went into her mother's room. Mama Abina was lying against her pillows with her eyes partially closed, and on her face was an expression Nana Ya had not seen in months. Peace. Nana Ya sat in the chair. She said, "What did he want?" Mama Abina opened her eyes fully and looked at her daughter. "He came because I asked him," she said. "Not because he wanted anything." Nana Ya said, "Mama, he is a mechanic. He services your cars. That is a professional relationship. You should not be inviting him to your hospital room." Mama Abina looked at her daughter for a long moment. Then she said, "Nana Ya, when I am gone, you will understand some things that you do not understand now." Nana Ya said, "You are not going anywhere." Mama Abina said, "Sit with me. Stop talking." Nana Ya sat. But she did not stop thinking. And what she thought, in the chair beside her dying mother's bed, was that a mechanic who made house visits and hospital visits was a mechanic who wanted something. And that something was in the will. And that she needed to find out what it was and stop it before it happened. She started with the lawyer. Barrister Labi had handled Mensah Corsa legal affairs for 19 years. He was 61, measured, and had the specific professional caution of someone who has been trusted with too many secrets to ever be careless with any of them. Nana Ya called him the day after the hospital visit. She said, "I want to know the current status of my mother's will." Barrister Larby said, "That is a conversation your mother would need to authorize." Nana Ya said, "My mother is very ill and her judgment may be compromised." Barrister Larby said, "Her judgment is her own until she tells me otherwise." Nana Ya said, "Has anyone attempted to influence her recently? Any new person in her life?" Barrister Larby said, "I'm going to stop you there." He ended the call. Nana Ya sat with her phone in her hand. Then she called her cousin, Adjoa, who worked in a law firm that had occasionally crossed paths with Barrister Larby's practice. She asked for the name of his paralegal. She had a conversation with the paralegal that she would later regret. She learned nothing from it, except that the will had been amended 7 months ago. 7 months ago. Kofi had visited the hospital 8 months ago. Nana Ya's hands were cold. She drove to the workshop. Asare Autos was on a service road behind a fuel station in Dzovulu. The sign was modest, painted letters on a board, not illuminated, not digital. The compound was organized in the way of a place where organization is functional rather than decorative. Tools on pegboards, vehicles at different stages of repair in clean bays. 2 apprentices working with the focused attention of people who have been taught that the work matters. Kofi was under a vehicle when Nana Ya walked in. He heard her heels on the concrete before he saw her. He rolled out from under the car. He stood. He was in his work clothes. His hands were dark with grease. The workshop smelled of oil and metal and the specific warm air of a place where things were repaired every day. Nana Ya looked at the workshop the way she looked at everything, as a space to be assessed for what it contained and what it revealed. What it revealed was a man who was exactly what he appeared to be. That, in her experience, was rare enough to be suspicious. She said, "I need to speak with you." Kofi said, "I am in the middle of a job." She said, "I'll wait." She sat in the single plastic chair near the entrance, the chair for waiting customers, and crossed her legs and looked at her phone. Kofi watched her for 1 second. Then he went back under the vehicle. He finished 20 minutes later. He washed his hands. He came to stand near her. He did not sit. She looked up. She said, "I want to know the nature of your relationship with my mother." He said, "I service her fleet." She said, "And?" He said, "And I have spoken with her on occasion when she wanted to speak." She said, "About what?" He said, "Various things." She said, "That is not an answer." He said, "It is the answer I can give you. What she discussed with me was between us. I would not share it without her permission." Nana Ya looked at him. She said, "My mother is dying. She is elderly, and she is ill, and she is vulnerable to people who would take advantage of that vulnerability." Kofi said nothing. She said, "I am telling you clearly. Whatever you think you have built with her, whatever arrangement or expectation you have, it will not stand. I will make sure of that." Kofi looked at her. He said, "I have no arrangement with your mother except an honest one. And I have no expectation except that the vehicles I service are paid for at the agreed rate." She said, "Then you won't mind signing something to that effect." He looked at her. He said, "I mind very much. I am not signing anything that implies I have done something that requires me to deny it." She said, "I can make things difficult for this business." The workshop was very quiet. The 2 apprentices had become very interested in their work. Kofi held her gaze. He said, "You are welcome to try." He walked back to the vehicle he had been working on. He did not look at her again. Nana Ya stood. She looked at the workshop, at the modest sign, and the pegboard tools, and the man who had dismissed her with perfect, quiet dignity. She left. In the car, she called her brother Kweku. She told him about Kofi. She told him about the hospital visit, about the amended will, about the conversation at the workshop. Kweku was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Nana ya. Mama knows what she is doing." She said, "She is dying, Kweku. She is not thinking." He said, "She has always been the clearest thinker in every room. That did not change because she got sick." She said, "Do you know this man?" A pause. He said, "I know of him." She said, "And?" He said, "And I think you should leave it alone." She said, "There is something in that will, Kweku." He said, "Then we will find out at the reading. Leave it alone." She ended the call. She did not leave it alone. She went back to the hospital that evening. Mama Abena was awake, propped against her pillows, reading something on a tablet. She looked up when Nana Ya came in. She looked at her daughter's face. She said, "What did you do?" Nana Ya sat down. She said, "I went to see the mechanic." Mama Abena was very still. She said, "Why?" Nana Ya said, "Because I needed to understand what he is to you, what he wants from you." Mama Abena looked at her daughter for a long time. The room was quiet. The machines beeped their soft, steady rhythms. Outside the window, the Accra evening was settling into dark. Mama Abena said, "What did you say to him?" Nana Ya said, "I told him that whatever arrangement he thought he had, it would not stand." Mama Abena closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were full of something that Nana Ya did not immediately recognize because her mother so rarely displayed it. Disappointment. Mama Abena said, "Get out of my room." Nana Ya said, "Mama," she said, "get out, and do not come back until you are ready to sit beside me without an agenda." Nana Ya stood. She left. She did not go back for 4 days. When she did, Mama Abena did not mention Kofi. Neither did she. But something had shifted in the room between them. The specific, irreversible shift of a trust that has been tested and found wanting. Mama Abena was kind. She was present. She held her daughter's hand and asked about her life and laughed at small things. But she did not say, "I will explain everything." She did not say, "There is nothing to worry about." She said, "Nana Ya, I love you completely. You know that." Nana Ya said, "I know, Mama." She said, "But love does not mean you know me fully, and I do not think you have ever tried to." Nana Ya had no answer for that. Mama Abena died 6 weeks later. On a Thursday morning, before the sun was fully up, with Kweku holding one hand and Sister Afua beside the bed and Nana Ya in the corridor, who had gone to get tea and had not made it back in time. She had not made it back in time. That was a thing she would carry. The will reading was scheduled for 11 months later, as the estate required. And now the envelope was on the mahogany table. And Kofi Asare was at the far end. And Nana Ya was watching both. Barrister Larby arrived at exactly 11 o'clock. He was a man who believed that punctuality was a form of respect, and that respect was the only currency that did not devalue over time. He carried a worn leather briefcase that he had used for 19 years, and that his wife had offered to replace twice, and that he had declined to replace, because it held everything it needed to hold, and that was enough. He greeted each person in the room by name. Nana Ya, seated at the head of the table in a black dress that had cost more than Kofi's monthly workshop rent, with her hands flat on the mahogany and her eyes already on the envelope. Kweku, beside her, quieter, with the specific careful posture of someone who knows more than they are showing and has decided that showing it would not help anyone yet. Uncle Fifi, Mama Abena's younger brother, 63, who had worked at the company in a senior management role for 15 years and had the weathered dignity of a man who has spent a long time being adjacent to power without holding it. Ajoa, the cousin, who had no formal stake in the estate but had been invited as family witness, and who was watching everything with the bright, careful attention of someone who has been told something in confidence and is now watching it become real. And Kofi, at the far end, in his clean shirt, with his hands on his knees. Barrister Larby sat at the center of the long side of the table, equidistant from everyone, and placed the briefcase on the floor and the envelope on the table in front of him. He said, "Before I open this document, I want to note for everyone present that this will was prepared by this office, witnessed by 2 independent commissioners, and amended on one occasion, 7 months before Mrs. Mensah Corsa's passing, also witnessed and properly executed. Its contents are legally sound and will not be subject to challenge on procedural grounds." He looked around the table. He said, "Are there any questions before I begin?" Nana Yar said, "Just open it." Barrister Larby looked at her. He opened the envelope. He put on his reading glasses. He read in the specific, measured cadence of a man who understands that the pace of delivery is as important as the content, that some words need space around them to land correctly. He began with the standard provisions, the company shares, the property, the investment portfolio. He read the distribution percentages with the steady, unhurried precision of someone reading weather. Factual, certain, not open to interpretation. Nana Yar received 40% of Mensah Corsa holdings. Kweku received 30%. Uncle Fifi received 10% in recognition of 15 years of service and loyalty. The remaining 20% went to a charitable foundation in Mama Abena's name, focused on vocational training for young people in Accra. Nana Yar's jaw tightened at 40%. She had expected 51. She had expected control. 40% was significant, but not controlling. With Kweku's 30, the 2 of them together had 70. A working majority, but only if Kweku agreed with her. Kweku, she had always believed, would agree with her. She looked at her brother. He was looking at the table. Something in his expression made her stomach tighten. Barrister Larby cleared his throat. He said, "I will now read the amended provisions. These are the clauses added 7 months ago." The room went very still. Barrister Larby looked at the second page. He said, "Mrs. Mensah Corsa's amendment concerns 3 matters. The first is a personal bequest. The second is a condition attached to the company's shares. The third is a letter, which I will distribute after the reading." He read the first matter. "To Mr. Kofi Asare of Asare Autos, Zorvulu, I bequeath the sum of 500,000 cedis to be used at his complete discretion. This bequest is made not in recognition of professional service, for which he has already been fairly compensated, but in recognition of the quality of his character, which I have observed over 3 years, and found to be among the finest I have encountered in my life." The room was completely silent. Nana Yar looked at Kofi. Kofi looked at the table. His jaw was working. The specific controlled movement of someone managing an emotion that is too large for the room. Barrister Larby continued. "The second matter," he said. "The 40% of company shares bequeathed to my daughter, Nana Yar Mensah Corsa, carries the following condition. These shares are held in trust for a period of 2 years from the date of this reading, during which time Nana Yar must demonstrate to the satisfaction of the company's independent board, comprising Uncle Fifi, Barrister Larby as estate executor, and 1 external member appointed by the board, that she is capable of leading the company with the values that built it. Specifically, that she treats every employee and stakeholder of the company with dignity regardless of their position or status. Failure to satisfy this condition within 2 years results in the 40% reverting to the charitable foundation." Nana Yar's hands were no longer flat on the table, they were gripping the edge of it. She said, "That cannot be." Barrister Larby said, "Please allow me to finish." She closed her mouth. He turned to the third matter. "The third matter," he said, "is a letter. Mrs. Mensah Corsa prepared individual letters for each person named in this will. I will distribute them now. He opened the briefcase. He placed envelopes, smaller than the will envelope, cream-colored, with names written in Mama Abina's own handwriting, the handwriting of a woman who had spent 67 years signing documents and had never lost the quality of her hand, in front of each person. Nana Ya's envelope, Kweku's envelope, Uncle Fifi's envelope, and the last one, carried to the far end of the table by Barrister Larby himself, placed in front of Kofi with a small, deliberate nod. Kofi looked at the envelope. He did not open it. Not yet. Nana Ya's hands were on her envelope. Her name in her mother's writing. She opened it. She read. The room watched her read. It watched her face move through the specific, uncontrolled sequence of a person receiving something they were not prepared for. Not anger, not shock, but the particular unraveling of someone who has been shown, in their dead mother's handwriting, exactly who they have been and what it cost. Kweku looked at his own letter. He put it in his pocket without opening it. He would open it at home, alone, in the way of someone who knows his mother well enough to know that what she wrote to him was not for this room. Uncle Fifi read his letter slowly, and when he finished, he folded it carefully and held it against his chest with both hands. Ajoa, who had no letter, watched all of them. Nana Ya set the letter down on the table. Her face had done something that none of the people in that room had ever seen it do. It had simply stopped performing. The composure, the sharpness, the specific architecture of a woman who had spent 41 years presenting herself as the most capable person in every room. All of it had gone. What was underneath it was something younger. Something that looked very much like the face of a girl who has been told by her mother, gently and finally and without malice, the truth. She looked at Kofi. He was still looking at his envelope. She said, and her voice was not the voice she had used at the workshop, or in the hospital corridor, or in any of the spaces where she had deployed it as a weapon. It was something else entirely. What did she say to you in her letter? Kofi looked up. He looked at Nana Ya for a long moment. He said, I haven't read it yet. She said, why not? He said, because I want to read it somewhere quiet, where I can give it the attention it deserves. She looked at him. She said, she trusted you. It was not a question. It was not an accusation. It was the specific, stripped-back statement of someone who has just understood something they had been refusing to understand. Kofi said, yes. She said, why you? He was quiet for a moment. He said, I don't know fully. I think because I never asked her to be anything other than what she was. Not the company, not the legacy, not the name. She was a person who had been carrying a very large thing for a very long time, and I was someone she could talk to without the thing being in the way. Nana Ya looked at the letter on the table in front of her. She said, she wrote to me about that. In this letter. She said I never learned to see her separately from the company. Kofi said nothing. She said the mechanic saw her more clearly than her own daughter. The room was completely still. Not the tense stillness of before. Something heavier, sadder. The specific gravity of a truth that has arrived after the person who knew it longest can no longer speak it. Nana Ya looked at the table. She said, I went to your workshop and I threatened you. Kofi said, yes. She said, and you did nothing. He said, there was nothing to do. I knew what I knew. The truth doesn't require defending. She looked at him. She said, what did you know? He said, that your mother was a woman who had spent 40 years making decisions that built something real, and that the last decision she made, about who to trust and who to tell certain things, was as careful as every other decision she had ever made. Nana Ya picked up the letter. She read one passage again. Her lips moved slightly. Then she folded it. She put it in her handbag. She looked at Barrister Larby. She said, "The condition on my shares. The 2 years." He said, "Yes." She said, "The board evaluation. What does it look like in practice?" He said, "Quarterly reviews, employee conduct surveys, stakeholder feedback, and one assessment specifically from Mr. Asare, who your mother appointed as the external board member." The room went very still again. This stillness was different from the others. This one had shock in it. Nanaya looked at Kofi. Kofi looked at Barrister Larby. He said, "I was not told about this." Barrister Larby said, "It is in the letter your mother wrote you, I believe." Kofi looked at his envelope. He picked it up. He opened it. He read. The room watched him read. His face did not perform anything. It simply received. The specific, undefended quality of someone who has no reason to manage what they feel, because they have nothing to protect. When he finished, he set the letter down. He looked at the window. Outside, the East Legon morning was doing what Accra mornings did, the specific, alive quality of a city that does not wait for anyone to be ready before it begins. He said quietly, to no one in particular, "She told me once that the quality of a company is the quality of the people who built it. Not the money, not the buildings, the people." He looked at Nanaya. He said, "She believed you had that quality. She was not certain you knew it yet." Nanaya looked at him. For the first time since he had appeared in her life, in the hospital corridor, in the workshop, in this room, she looked at him without the assessment, without the calculation, without the specific lens of threat that she had placed over everything associated with him. She looked at him the way her mother had described looking at him in the letter, as a person. She said, "She was right. I didn't know it." He said nothing. She said, "I owe you an apology." He looked at her steadily. She said, "I came to your workshop, and I threatened a man who had done nothing except be honest with my mother. I accused you of things you had no thought of. I treated you as less than you are because of what you do for work, and what you drive, and what your hands look like after a day's work. And I did it because I was afraid of what my mother saw in you that she could not find in me." The room was absolutely silent. Kofi held her gaze. He said, "Your mother never stopped believing you would find it in yourself. That is what the condition means, not punishment, an invitation." Nanaya looked at the letter in her handbag. She said, "She wrote almost the same thing." He said, "I know. She told me what she planned to write." She looked at him. She said, "She told you." He said, "She trusted me with the shape of it, not the words. The words were hers alone." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that no one in that room, not Kweku, not Uncle Fifi, not Ajoa, not Barrister Larby, had ever heard Nanaya Mensah-Corsa say in any room in her 41 years. She said, "I don't know how to do what she did. I know how to run the numbers and manage the board and close the deals. But the part she did that made people stay for 20 years and trust her and come to her hospital room when they didn't have to, I don't know how to do that." Kofi looked at her. He said, "You just did part of it." She looked at him. He said, "You told the truth in a room full of people when it was easier not to." She held his gaze. Then she looked at Kweku. Kweku was looking at her with an expression she recognized from childhood. The specific expression her little brother had always had when she did something that surprised him in the right direction. She said, "You knew?" He said, "Mama told me some of it. Not all." She said, "And you said nothing?" He said, "It wasn't mine to say." She looked at the mahogany table, at the portraits on the walls, at her mother's name in the company documents, at the man at the far end of the table who had driven here in a 12-year-old pickup truck and had sat through this entire morning with the same quiet steadiness he had brought to every space he had ever entered. She said, "Mr. Asare." He said, "Kofi." She said, "Kofi. I would like to understand the company the way my mother understood it. Not the numbers. I know the numbers. The way she saw the people in it. The way she made decisions about who to trust and why." He said, "That is not something I can teach you." She said, "I know, but you saw how she did it. You were paying attention." He said, "Yes," she said. "Would you be willing to tell me what you saw?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm willing to be on the board, as she asked, and I will be honest in what I observe. I won't shade it in your favor because you asked, and I won't shade it against you because of how we started." She said, "That is exactly what I am asking for." He said, "Then yes, Barrister Larby was writing. He wrote with the specific, contained satisfaction of a man who has executed many wills and has learned to recognize the ones that work. Not because they distribute money correctly, but because they say what needs to be said in the way that only the dead can say it, with the clarity that comes from having nothing left to lose in the saying. This was one of those wills. He wrote and said nothing. Because some moments did not require witnessing. They required only letting them be. 2 years and 3 months later, the quarterly board review produced the following summary statement, written by the external board member in the handwriting of a man who measured his words the way he measured tolerances in an engine, with the understanding that precision is not pedantry, it is respect for the thing you are working on. Nanaya Mensah Corsa has demonstrated, over the period of this review, a quality of leadership that is earned rather than assumed. She has learned to listen before she speaks in rooms where she previously spoke first. She has conducted 2 open staff forums where she heard, without interruption, the concerns of people at every level of the company, from the senior managers to the drivers of the fleet she once could not name. She knows the fleet drivers by name now. All 14 of them. She visited the workshop in Zorvulu on a Thursday afternoon in the second quarter, and spent 3 hours understanding how the vehicles she had inherited were maintained and by whom and to what standard. She left with grease on her jacket sleeve and did not comment on it. The 40% of Mensah Corsa holdings should be released from trust to Nanaya Mensah Corsa unconditionally. She has earned it, not because she is her mother's daughter, because she has become, in these 2 years, something of her own. Nanaya read the report in her office. She read it twice. She called Kofi. He answered on the second ring. She said, "I read the report." He said, "I know. Barrister Larby sent it this morning." She said, "The part about the workshop visit. You remembered the jacket." He said, "I remember most things." She said, "My mother said that about you, in her letter, that you notice what most people miss because you are paying attention when other people are performing." He said, "She was kind in how she put it." She said, "She was accurate." A pause. She said, "Kofi, the foundation, the 20% that went to vocational training for young people in Accra." He said, "Yes." She said, "I want to fund an expansion, a dedicated automotive training program, part of the foundation in her name. I want to work with your workshop to design the curriculum." He was quiet for a moment. She said, she wrote in her letter that she wished she had done more of that. More building of the kind of people who build things. She said the best investment she ever made was the contract she gave to someone who showed her exactly what they were and asked for nothing more than what they had earned. Kofi said nothing. She said, "She meant you." He said, "I know." She said, "Will you help design the program?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Bring Kweku. He builds things. He'll understand the structure better than either of us alone." She said, "Saturday?" He said, "Saturday. "Come to the workshop. I'll have tea." She said, "I'll bring the biscuits." He said, "Fair enough." She ended the call. She sat at her desk. On the desk was the letter. Cream-colored, her name in her mother's handwriting, the handwriting she had seen on documents her whole life and had always understood as signature and authority and the mark of a woman who ran things. She understood it differently now. It was the handwriting of a woman who saw things, who had spent 67 years seeing things that other people stood too close to their own reflection to see, who had met a mechanic in the rain and seen the quality in him before he said a word, who had sat in a hospital bed and worried not about the company, but about her daughter. Not the daughter who would run the company, but the daughter who had never learned to look at anyone the way Abena herself looked at everyone, as though they might matter, as though they probably did, as though the correct assumption, until proven otherwise, was that the person in front of you was carrying something worth seeing. Nana Ya put the letter away. She stood. She walked to the window of the office that had been her mother's and was now hers. The same desk, the same wood, the same view of Accra building itself in real time. She looked at the city. She thought about a 12-year-old pickup truck parked outside a gate, about a man who had greeted her in a compound and received nothing back, about a hospital corridor and a door closing, about a workshop and a threat that had been met with silence and dignity, about an envelope on a mahogany table, about the word collapse, because that is what happened to her in that room. Not physically, not loudly, but the collapse of every assumption she had carried about worth and visibility, and who in a room deserved attention, and who did not. The collapse of the idea that she had ever been as clear-eyed as she believed herself to be. And in the rubble of that collapse, something had been built. Slowly, quarterly, in staff forums and fleet driver names, and a Thursday afternoon with grease on her jacket sleeve. Something she could not have named before, and could now. Her mother's daughter. Not the daughter who inherited the company. The daughter who had finally learned to see. At the Asare Auto's workshop in Zorvulu, a new sign went up in the 3rd year. Below the original painted letters, a smaller board. Mensa Corsa Vocational Foundation, Automotive Training Program. The first cohort was 12 young people, ages 18 to 24, from communities across Accra. They came with work clothes and worn shoes, and the specific, careful hope of someone who has been given access to something they were not certain they deserved. Kofi taught them the way his own teacher had taught him, not with the authority of someone who knows more, but with the attention of someone who understands that the quality of a person's work is inseparable from the quality of the person. That you cannot teach precision without teaching patience. That you cannot teach repair without teaching the specific, humble understanding that broken things are not failed things. They are things that have been used fully and need care. On the day the first cohort completed their program, Nana Ya came. She stood in the workshop compound in a dress that was simpler than anything she had worn in the first 40 years of her life, and watched 12 young people receive their certificates from Kofi's hands. She watched their faces when he handed the certificates. The specific quality in those faces, not just pride, not just relief. Something more fundamental. The look of someone who has been told, by the weight of a document and the presence of people who showed up for them, that they are the kind of person worth investing in. She recognized it, because she had felt it herself, in a report written in a mechanic's handwriting. When Kofi handed the last certificate, he looked up. He saw Nana Ya across the compound. She nodded. He nodded. That was all. That was enough. In the corner of the workshop, on a small shelf above the tool pegboard, was a framed photograph. Mama Abena, at 64, standing outside the workshop on the day her car was fixed. Rain-damp, unhurried, looking at the camera with the expression she had worn in every photograph that captured her honestly. Not performing, not presenting. Present. Below the photograph, in the handwriting of a man who chose his words with precision, she saw what mattered. We are trying to do the same. Some people spend their whole lives being walked past, not because they are invisible, because the people walking have not learned to look. Mama Abena learned early. She looked at a mechanic in the rain and saw a person worth knowing. She saw what her daughter would become before her daughter could see it herself. She wrote it in a letter and sealed it in an envelope and trusted that the truth, given time and the right conditions, would do what truth always does. Arrive at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right room, to exactly the people who needed it. If this story moved something in you, if you felt Kofi's quiet dignity, Mama Abena's wisdom, and Nana Ya's long and honest journey toward becoming, subscribe to Tales of Tears African now and turn on the notification bell. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that the most powerful person in any room is not always the one at the head of the table. Leave a comment. Tell us the moment that changed everything for you in this story. We will be here with the next one, which begins, as all the best ones do, with someone being overlooked for the very last time.